Aloha, everyone. This is Ashli from Golden Goddesses with After the Show on Threshold to Ascension. Today is August 2nd. It's the inaugural episode of the show, and those of you that may have been listening in may have been aware we had a few glitches. We was on the radio show side, and they were kind enough to keep working it. So those of you that stuck with us, I appreciate it. Laura and I are going to do a little after the show because there are many things that we didn't actually have a chance to touch base on. And how about, Laura, if I start with the two questions, and then we'll go into the sovereignty, soul alchemy, and the dormant DNA. Is that okay? Yep. So the first is from Johanna S. in Canada. And she said that she's aware that her mission is to hold the light for ascension, that she's a Stargate keeper, but she doesn't know why. She has a lot of benevolent ET contact, and in her home in Canada, in this tall building she lives in, she often sees portals opening up in the sky. And she's wondering what you may have to share about your knowledge of how Stargate keepers are helping during this ascension process, helping Gaia Sophia and helping the collective.
Well, it's really a part of the circulation that this individual is holding. There's reversal currents, there's scrambling of DNA codes and all sorts of, what do you call it? Distortions in some of the platonic solids, particularly the dodecahedron, which represents the ether. And that's been compromised for a while. When the sun started to move through the 13th sign, Ophiuchus, that began to open up more. And that is like a big breath of fresh air for a lot of starseed types that have been kind of waiting for that 13th gate activation. But some people, and it sounds like her, have been holding it for longer, just kind of holding space for that, holding that light, really encouraging the clearing of those energies because we're the conduits. And if we're not able to do that, we can easily be kind of siphoned off to another timeline. So advanced souls that can, connect in with their, maybe star systems they have memories of or councils they're, a part of or representative of, just have a mission that can be dormant for a certain period of their life until they, have that awakening. And very often the school systems are the things that suppress it the most, or our inability to articulate to our families and friends around us. But, many of us still do it regardless of what anybody has to say. So it just really means that one is holding the right circuitry, is fluid enough. Perhaps they've had a Kundalini awakening, something that's allowed their chakras to open up in a much more unmanipulated kind of way. Because if you think Stargate Keeper, there's also gatekeepers within those Stargates that have been trying to control the Stargates. So it usually throws one on a journey of needing to kind of clear that within themselves, if there's anything in there, to be able to really hold that kind of space. And it could be something they might have, done in a past life too. But, some terminologies can be given, indigo, crystal, emerald order, or from consciousness. And but it's not a hierarchy. I mean, it's based on having the capacity to activate other people to recognize that they're made of it too. They just might have completely fallen asleep or gone into a trance. So those that are really holding the light and holding the space won't necessarily go there. And if they do, they'll recognize it pretty quick because it'll impact their bodies. Whereas other people get so acclimated to the programmings that they can actually thrive in that false light and then all of a sudden be thrown into the dark night of the soul and feel very discombobulated until they connect with that organic light. So most individuals that are Stargate keepers already have an idea of what that organic light is. They don't rely on attachments like money or status, or, some of the more matrix type programs. They tend to be a lot more organic and connected to the earth and able to see these sort of things. So, the role is really to hold that space, to invite people to, let go of the things that have impeded that flow, that have connected them into, some dangerous things that are disguised, again, in the form of either false ascension, false light, or the doom gloom propaganda. Because either extreme is out of balance. We have to find that center point within ourselves and look at our own inner conditions to achieve that sacred union, which heals the grids of the earth, which helps those stargates to open. And we can neutralize the weaponry when we can do it within our own being. And if we have the willingness to clear our own inner elementals, the earth responds to us, and we begin to see things clearing and cleansing and purifying. And very often we just want to invite as many people into that as possible. But, sometimes our greatest virtues can keep us a little stuck, like compassion, or I don't want to leave anybody in the dust, so I'm just going to stay stuck with them. But, if you can hold a frequency beyond that and still be in it, you're a big bridge between the old and new paradigm.
And how would you differentiate between Stargate Keeper and Gatekeeper?
A gatekeeper would be some connected to entities or negative alien agendas that want to control the Stargates, want to clog them up, want to throw them into reversal so that, we're digressing. And then we turn to things like transhumanism or negative technologies, where, the human race is just being manipulated and, only some benefit as far as the resources of the hidden technologies, and everybody else is just sort of further digressed into sort of more enslavement. And so the gatekeepers would, be like archonic, patriarchal, which are sort of the human representations, at least the patriarchal part of these darker agendas, and where the archons on a more multidimensional level are kind of the parasites that can attach to our wounds or our fragmented, splintered aspects. And so when we recognize those gatekeepers, whether it's energetic or in the form of a human that comes into our life, it might be a plant, it might be somebody who is so fragmented or has been through a trauma-based mind control thing where they're holding that agenda within their nature without realizing it, that can end up being like a gatekeeper, you have to get to the other side of that person's influence in order to set yourself free. It would be like a gatekeeper. Mm-hmm. It could be something that we see in the world that starts to infect our creative energy and limits our capacity to move into ascension. But a Stargate keeper would be one that holds the space of the purified form of those gates being able to open because they're able to do that within their own being. And so it's like the difference between connecting with an artificial intelligence signal or the organic ascension signals. And they're both available to us in our environment, and it depends on our consciousness which one we're going to connect with.
And so the Stargate Keepers, it's not just the point where they're at, but also the higher vibrational grid as well that they're anchoring that light into.
Yes.
And so how important do you feel it is for them to understand exactly what it is they're doing as Stargate Keepers?
Well, I think it kind of comes down to whatever type of person you are. Do you have a lot of air signs? Is there a lot of Mercury energy where you prefer to figure it out, or are you more water orientated where you just need to feel it and know it and you just do it? Is it more earth based where the physical cleansing, the detoxing, the taking care of the human vessel is more of a priority? I mean, it really depends on where we feel most called to, work on ourselves and what elemental we feel most drawn to identify with. And again, if you're more mentally based, some people is like, I need answers. I need to know what the heck I'm doing. Other people it's just like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I know I'm doing something. You might not know why you're traveling to a certain location on the planet to, clear some, miasma and polluted, energetic energy that comes about through dark rituals and, just basic toxicity. So, and sometimes people are a mix of all sorts of things where they just intuitively feel it, but then they finally, kind of figure out what it is they're doing. I mean, that kind of comes down to one's personal astrological chart. Mm-hmm. So I think it depends. It's a case-by-case basis. I work with individuals that really don't know what they're doing, and they don't really need to know, and other people that are like, I need some answers because I can't take it anymore unless I know what the heck is going on.
And so the elements that you relate to, the ones that you mentioned, is it a combination of the chart, or is it the sun sign, or how is that? How do you determine that when you do your amazing readings?
Well, it's a mixture of all sorts of things. You might have your sun sign next to 5 planets, mm-hmm. right? So you're drawing in the influence of maybe Mars and Pluto and Uranus, and it interacts with your sun sign. You might have a weakened sun sign, but everything else is really, really strong, like your heart energy, but your creative energy might be somewhat challenged or wounded, because Chiron, the wounded healer, is going to play a huge part, because our injuries and our childhood wounds can keep us locked into a victim kind of mentality until we seek the path of knowledge, mm-hmm. to start finding the solutions, to start to turn those wounds into jewels. that, change the frequency of those former injuries. So there's also a heliocentric chart, which gives us the perspective from the solar, and it'll include an earth sign. And that gives us an idea of what our mission is. So if you look at the heliocentric, okay, here's my mission before I came to Earth. And then you look at the chart once the person gets to Earth, it can be a very, very different chart. Because once you get to Earth, you're dealing with family, friends, society, culture, social engineering, and a lot of manipulations, a lot of, high vibrational beings, tend to be targeted with medications. You're not focusing in your classroom and you need to be, compliant, and some of those challenges can come up. So again, it really depends on the person. Sometimes rebellion is the best thing. And sometimes just kind of playing the game and then learning how to change the game once you become awakened enough, you can change it from the inside out. It, again, depends on the person. So I look at the outer planets, which are Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. And the way we interact with the outer planets sort of determines how well we can flow with forces a little bit beyond our control that are here to shape us and help us to develop ourselves. And they rule generations. So Uranus will help us to have the wake-up calls that we need, the epiphanies and the insights to help us to recognize our own personal truth or a greater truth, unity consciousness, sovereignty. But if we don't have a good relationship with that energy, it can end up as breakdowns, crises, anxiety disorders, because we're just not able to fully connect into it, because society doesn't encourage it. It doesn't encourage our initiations, because the outer planets shape us over the course of time. It's not going to happen overnight. Pluto is death, rebirth, alchemy, and transformation. So if we have a difficult connection with Pluto, we might feel like we're stuck in the birth canal and we can't seem to transform. We just feel like we're dying all the time, or, we feel hopeless and even like maybe like we're dying on some level. But once we form a more harmonious relationship with it, it can help us to transform and transmute and become alchemists. And then Neptune, when it's distorted or we're not in good connection with it, it can create kind of the feeling that we're lost in the illusion, or we're haunted by the past, or we're not seeing things clearly. It's like playing music out of tune, because Neptune's very much connected to like the music of the spheres and the multidimensional nature of all things. And when we're in harmony with that, we tend to be more artistic. We recognize that reality is fluid and we're able to influence it, from our imagination, reaching into the highest levels of our imagination instead of the haunted imagination that can loop us and keep us looping in fear and, just maybe entity attachments or things where in the multidimensional scheme of things, we're connecting with things that are pulling us under versus the higher dimensional energies that are helping us to purify and notice the vastness of how our creativity and our imagination can move mountains and shift the physical reality as we know it. If we don't ground it and anchor it, we might just have those exalted moments or just that great feeling and then it's gone. So very often if we bounce back and forth between feeling like we get it and then we've lost it, a lot of times those people are just going back and forth between bringing it into physical manifestation. So like a shaman or somebody who works energy might have more success in healing than somebody who's just, working on just here's medicine to take. Mm-hmm. Well, how can we affect the energetic aspect of it? Because energy happens before matter. If we get our thought forms correct or in alignment, the physical is going to match it. But if there's stuck energy or things that are needing to be cleared or attachments, then we might be having a really miserable time and wonder why we have all these obstacles in front of us. And a lot of light workers, or whatever you want to call it, star seeds, dark workers too, shadow workers, sometimes are incarnated into the greatest challenges. Mm-hmm. Because if they can get through it, like a spirit warrior, then they can help everybody else kind of overcome some of those adversities.
I wonder how thick your own spiritual light armor is with all that you've been through on your journey, and I continue to applaud you for picking yourself up and keeping going. So that was an important thing I'd like to just reiterate for those that might be listening. You talked about a chart that you do that shows the mission before incarnation and then the mission once you get here based on those influences, and that's called a heliocentric chart. Is that correct, in case anyone's listening is interested in finding that information?
Yeah, heliocentric. And if you do a reading with me, we can go right into the heliocentric. I kind of leave it up to the people that get in touch with me. I have just a lot of different options to choose from when you sign up.
And the website that they're going to go to is
cosmicgaia.org.
Perfect. And it's really some great information on that website. So you've been talking about the elements, and I know when we were setting up for this chat, that was one of the things that you wanted to touch on. Is there anything more in your heart that you want to share about the elements, or have you covered what you wished to cover on that? Because I know that was important to you.
Well, I mean, we're made of earth, air, fire, water. We might have certain affinities towards certain elements based in our chart, but it doesn't mean that we're not the wholeness of it all. Now that the ether's back online, because the 13th sign that started to move through Ophiuchus in 2010, which means that if you only need to alter your chart if you were born after 2010. Everybody before, you don't have to worry about incorporating that 13th sign because the sun wasn't moving through it until 2010, which was actually when the hosting of the Ascension timeline switched from the Melchizedek to the goddess frequency.
Right.
And they'll start hosting in the Andromedan energy because Andromeda and Milky Way galactic core is connecting back into oneness during this window. So the elements, now that we have more access to the ether, doesn't mean that without that 13th sign people weren't already there. It's just a little bit more difficult. That really helps to purify the inner elements. So when we think about it, our skies are sprayed, our waters are contaminated, the earth has extinction and degradation, the fire element, is out of control with bombs and weapons and all this and that. So when we can take it upon ourselves to do the inner work, and we can recognize the toxicity of the waters, and we can personally clear them, clear our depression, recognizing that it's really revealing of our deepest soul longing that we need to answer to instead of be depressed because we don't think we can find that or get in touch with it or make it manifest. That inner work is going to help to clear the outer elements. So the earth responds to us. And when we begin to advance our DNA, when we begin to purify our inner elements through purifying our negative ego, which is the most toxic thing to our elements, just see with patriarchal agendas, and we take it upon ourselves to do that work, we begin to clear that energy. When we allow ourselves to be free thinkers and we, keep the stuff coming at us in check, any form of mind control or social engineering, then we help to clear the air. We help to clear the water, again, like, any sort of depression we might feel or heaviness in our emotional bodies. When we begin to allow the regenerative power of earth to help us to heal on a physical level, we're a part of that greater healing. And when we allow the fire element to turn from maybe rage or anger into what is your greatest passion and what's your inspiration and to move in that direction, then we're really playing our part in helping to shift into higher earth energies because we're allowing ourselves to work with our own inner elements.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting how often people say they're waiting for Gaia to ascend, right, or to shift frequency, and perhaps not recognize that their inner work is a key part of that happening.
Yes. I mean, we are the Ascension. It's from the inside out. Mm-hmm. We really do this. We can't really wait for anything if we don't take it upon ourselves because there's always going to be contaminating factors. And if we allow ourselves to absorb it or become it or become the product of it, usually starting with the mind control or, just feeling the heaviness of it all or allowing ourselves to kind of give up or rely on vices or addictions or things that don't really serve us, or we allow the frustration of all to just make us like tense and angry, then we're kind of like stuck a little bit. But when we do that inner work, we really step back and look at ourselves and we begin to clear it, we stand way more of a chance of upgrading our DNA and opening those dormant chakras. And that, how can the earth do anything but respond to that? Because, we're creating our reality just based on the things that we're carrying and the things that we're holding on to. And when we liberate ourselves from those things, we're going to see a much more liberated existence. It's just like if we're feeling bad about ourselves, we tend to notice people looking at us funny. It's like, what are you looking at? What's wrong with me? And if you're feeling just really good, it's like you filter out all those people looking at you funny and you only see people smiling back.
Well, exactly. And I think the understanding that, again, the micro and the macro works in so many different ways. And if we truly understand unity consciousness, then again, how we treat our own bodies is how the planet is treated, right? It's all such a flow back and forth that, again, the intention of Threshold to Ascension, the radio show, is to help people realize or get even more excited about how that inner work will continue to assist in what seems to be the outer shifting.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't, go for all those philosophies of everything's an outer reflection and it's all in here.
That's not what I meant.
Yes, in some cases it is. And other times we're just throwing a lot of curveballs that can be senior to these lower forces.
Right.
That has nothing to do with what we're reflecting. It's just something that wants to challenge us, wants to play the role of the opposition, that we get the opportunity to rise above. And then there's other things that are going to be just a direct reflection of what we're carrying.
Right.
So
to clarify what I said, I want to ask you this question. So I'm not saying that everything that's out there is from the inside, but it is in a way, because if all of us on the planet, let me ask you this question, what you feel about this. I'm interested. If all of us on the planet, or the majority of us, were truly in our hearts holding that higher frequency, do you still feel, and I'm not putting you on the spot, I'm asking for your opinion, that the Archonic network would still have such a control if more and more of us stand in our light and stand in our truth? Does that still have a control no matter what? Or do we collectively raise the frequency high enough where it can't be here? What's your thought on that?
I feel we starve them if we don't give them something to feed on. Exactly. But they might still show up, but we might notice them more like annoying mosquitoes instead of things that are completely crushing us and our whole human existence. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, okay, they might still exist, but are they hooking in? Are they compromising us? Are they controlling us? Are they throwing us out of balance? Or do we notice that they can't penetrate our aura because we strengthen ourselves enough? And if we do that as a humanity, I look at unity consciousness like it's the immune system of the earth. Right. When we come together and we unify and that power increases, parasites, archons, negative agendas, they just can't really touch us. It's the power we give them that keeps them alive. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't really be there unless we are operating from those constructs that they've taught us. And when we master that, when we rise above it, they might still exist for other people, but they don't have a chance of penetrating our aura, our hearts, our souls. But it doesn't mean that we're going to wipe out that whole population. But we're actually bridging ourselves away from a world that is infested with it. But we're still kind of bridging. We have an agreement to still be present with those that might be struggling with it. Right. But then we, end up in a teacher role or a mastery role without sort of that old paradigm, ego, spiritual, guru. I'm not saying all gurus are like that at all. Don't get me wrong. But, what's a real teacher? It's also the recognition that you're still a student and that, it's through humility that you're able to be receptive and that you're able to touch people because you can greet them on a human level. You can see who they are beyond the programming, which encourages them to step into the wholeness and truth of who they really are. And I think a lot of us still have an agreement to help those individuals, and there's going to be things or attacks that try and stop us, but the more you grow an immunity to it, the more you recognize the game that it's playing, and the more you choose to stay balanced and whole and solid within yourself, you end up exhausting them. And the hope is that we'll all starve these archonic, Luciferian, satanic networks that are, acting as the power structures, but they're only in power because we give the power. The minute we don't, they're gone.
Exactly. And is that the role of sovereignty that you're talking about? Is that willingness to stand in your own truth? How would you go into the sovereignty a little bit more?
That's standing in your own truth, and standing in our own truth does not mean that, gosh, we have it all figured out. It means that we're honest with our process. Right. If we're depressed, we're not ashamed of it. We don't necessarily need to hide it from others. Of course, we don't want to bring others down, but when we can just be real, and we can work together and we can hold hands in this rehabilitation process, because we're in a rehabilitation process. The 13th sign relates to the Divine Mother, and the 13th gate, which is the core of the planet, which relates to the Mother, but it's not ruled by a planet. And it's not ruled by earth, air, fire, or water like the rest of the zodiac signs. It's ruled by the ether, and Chiron, the wounded healer, is what is the planetary ruler of it, and that's an asteroid. And so it's our willingness to look at the wounds that's going to set us free. It's our denial of them that keeps us acting out or, masking it with something, some attachment that's external, maybe some behavior pattern that's manipulative or narcissistic. When we can just be sovereign, we're authentic, we're able to go through the processes and the healing and the inner work without that ego attachment to, well, if I'm a spiritual being, I better be like Christ-like and holy and saintly. It's like, well, we'll eventually get there, but can't we be real along the way? Because if we skip any steps, we're just going to be, wearing a facade that's going to only fool us and others.
Exactly. And I'm going to bring in Sarah M's question. She's from Queensland, Australia, because it kind of ties into this in so many people that have been caught up in that program, if you will, of not being good enough, low self-esteem, victimization, self-pity. And her question relates to an experience she had going into her bank, where her bank teller all of a sudden started telling her how she wasn't good enough. The teller herself, and Sarah was kind of caught off guard. And her question is, what's your advice of how do we reach people? And is it our job to reach people who are caught up in low self-esteem, self-pity, and victimization?
Well, I mean, that's almost like a human form of Archon, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if we can connect in with our higher self and integrate it into physical reality, we can also connect into an Archonic force and integrate that into our physical expression and undermine others and manipulate others and cause others to feel less than. And I've run into that a lot. I sort of have a kind of combative reaction, not necessarily in their face, but within myself, like, I'm just not going to go there.
Right.
You know, I could play that game with other people, and I can't even conceive of it. I'd rather point out a person's potential and encourage them to walk in that direction than, you know, take that away from them, because, you know, those kind of wounds last for a long time. Think about the way our parents talk to us or the way we related to our teachers. You know, some of those wounds can keep us from all sorts of things. So that's where the warrior steps in. You know, we got to remember what we're doing this for. And I always remind myself, this isn't about me. This is about Gaia. This is about humanity. Right. This is about understanding the things that are trying to make this impossible and difficult. And I kind of joke with my clients, like, there's going to be that part of us. Maybe some of us won't be able to fully clear it, but it doesn't have to make decisions for us. You know, I look at like a kid that needs to sit in the back seat and is not allowed to drive it, does not have a driver's license. My higher self, the greater good of me, my integrity is the one in the driver's seat. My transparency, my humility, my vulnerability, my ability to allow myself to get sad if I feel wounded and not let it take a chunk out of me, but have it allow me to feel more into my own self-recognition. Like sometimes when I get bashed, it reinforces my truth even more. I'm like, oh, okay, you tried to take that away from me? Well, guess what? Now it's even louder.
Right.
And then there's parts of me that have been wounded before that come up, and I'm like a little child again, like, oh, I've been rejected or mistreated. And so I'm not able to do that as easily. And those are the perfect times to just look at that and give it love, unconditional love, and invite it to be mentored by the parts of me that are completely and utterly in divine wisdom, because every single one of us has access to it. So those parts that are hurting are just crying to come home that other people might be reminding us of, but it's not so much that we should allow it to take away. Allow it to remind you to be that much closer to your divine heart. And when we hold the burden of other people's ignorance or mistakes or lack of integrity or cruelty, then we can't send the energy back. We end up carrying it. It ends up hurting us when it's not really ours to carry. We need to allow ourselves to just say, you know, I let that go. A Christ-conscious person doesn't operate like that. So that's somebody that you don't need to deal with anymore. I want the next customer service person. I didn't like the way I was treated.
Right.
You know, stand in your power, be bold, because nobody deserves it. You know, even if you are mistaken and have a flaw, every human does. Anybody who thinks they don't has an issue. And anybody who's sitting there criticizing and acting like they're all high and mighty, that's a way greater glitch in their personality matrix than somebody who's just, you know, struggling to navigate this human experience from good intention.
Well, and I think that's true that, you know, with Christ consciousness to me is not about the expectation that others are going to be perfect. It's about holding that space for all of us to do our stumbling and pick ourselves up and continue our journey. You know, to me, if someone truly chooses to heal, they're never beyond redemption, right? There's a difference if someone chooses not to heal or chooses to continue to violate or continue, and they'll have their own soul journey, you know, with source or whatever. But I think as we hold space for each other, especially getting through this patriarchal agenda, it's really about having that discerning compassion where we don't judge others if they are truly choosing to recognize what may have been out of balance and then set the intention and begin to walk their walk again.
Totally.
And when people,
everybody who has that approach towards people, they're the ones that need to check themselves.
Right.
It's just a negative energy. The person walks away, just you didn't help that person at all. And I think part of us in this human experience is just the willingness to stand back and self-correct. I think that's a higher form of mastery than thinking we have it all figured out.
Exactly.
I say sorry more than I'm like, well, what's wrong with you? I'm in the right. I'm not that person. I'm like, what can I do to show up better or keep misunderstanding from happening? I turn the sword on myself more than I turn it on other people. But when people turn the sword on me first, I got to take a breath, maybe walk away and write them or say, come on, that's not going to help. That really pushed my buttons. That really hurt. And if they undermine even your attempt to be authentic or vulnerable, then that person doesn't belong in your sphere. I think
there's a difference between that self-flagellation, right, and taking an objective inventory of the opportunities to continue coming back home to who you truly are, right? And so I think that for a lot of us in that program of suppression, whether it's AI or whether it's the Archonic network, many of us are taught that we're not good enough. We have to be better, right? And for the people that get caught up in that victimization loop or caught up in low self-esteem, how do you approach those individuals when they come into your circle? Do you kind of just send them love? Do you reach out? How do you coach people that might be caught up in that kind of victimization, low self-esteem, which I believe a lot of it is part of this whole suppression agenda and Archonic grid?
Well, I just have so much compassion for it. I mean, I can identify with it. I struggle with it myself. I've been able to identify with parts of me that can be a little bit more dominant in my nature than those parts of me that are still there, but they do show up from time to time, and it's one of the strongest things I feel called to just hold space for or give love to. Absolutely. I mean, I was always like that, growing up. But if somebody's choosing to deny those wounds or those insecurities and they turn into a narcissistic kind of arrogant person, which is there to kind of mask that discomfort that they feel, they need something to compensate for it. I find those kind of personalities really difficult. You just want to call them out. You just want to say, come on, dude, cut it out already. And I mean, I've been close to people like that. I've had relationships with them, and it's almost impossible. But if somebody, has the willingness to just say, wow, okay, I feel uncomfortable, I feel shy, I don't feel good enough, that's so much easier than somebody who's wearing a mask or creating a facade. Mm-hmm. The ones that create a facade, I can only just plant seeds and just send them like hope and love and forgiveness. But yeah, I mean, I think the insecurity thing, a lot of people think that they're lacking in something when really mostly it's the opposite, where they have so much abundance of something, gifts and abilities that they have not been able to fully express, that there's an insecurity because they're living a life that is in disconnect from it. Mm-hmm. And that insecurity is more about, why can't I be all that I am? Why do I feel blocked? Why do I feel shy? Why do I feel less than? I must be lacking something. So we got to take that same sensation of insecurity and look at it like a doorway to our abundance, and not allow that sensation to shut us down, but let it inspire us to open that gate and find our inner treasures. Mostly insecure people have more gifts and abilities than they can imagine, and the ones that are super arrogant, it doesn't mean they don't have the same gifts, but they're polluting them, and they're making it very, very unattractive to want to enjoy. It's like, great, you have these abilities, but you know what? Not interested because of your attitude, right? Compared to somebody who might be a little shy and a little nervous. I'd much rather, work with that person and enjoy their gifts than somebody who is ego posturing to the point where, you know what, I can go elsewhere. Mm. So, and that's just their choice, a person's choice. And we all have that choice. Some of it, has to do with our orientation and, some of the astrological components that aren't just the stars. It's just who we are and what we connect with, what we resonate with in the universe. But, don't think confidence is the ticket to doing your mission. Don't wait for perfection or confidence. Just know that more than likely it's there. And sometimes you just got to get on the treadmill and begin to work that atrophied part of yourself that just hasn't had enough of your attention or enough validation from others. And of course, we don't want other people's validation, but we're growing up in school systems where our guidance counselors don't tell us that we're shamans or medicine women or healers or alchemists. We're just like, we're put in a box. And I think that creates a huge insecurity because that's shutting off a huge aspect of who we are. Whereas other people that get rewarded constantly, that end up in a healing awareness, might still not be able to shake that reward projection that society has given them for being able to play the matrix real well.
Speaking of switching on, I'd like to kind of switch our conversation here to a moment, because something that you brought up earlier that I really would like to make sure that you have time to speak of so that the listeners can hear it. You talked about what happens when we switch on our dormant DNA, what that dormant DNA represents, and what actually happens when that's switched on.
I think we're in a slow kind of metamorphosis in a lot of ways. I mean, people have Ascension symptoms, and sometimes I'm like, is this a symptom, or am I Googling, what that I might have? I don't know. My Google history is like, I joke that I should have a PhD because I've Googled all these symptoms, from everything from this is really good thing to, oh my gosh, something's really wrong. But I've gotten a little wiser over the course of time, knowing, sometimes you got to go into a low place to get to the high place. So I never stop the journey if it doesn't feel good. I just keep going and going and going until I get to the site that confirms that this herb will take care of, or this is a really good sign, and whatever. I don't Google that much anymore, but I guess my point is we're going through a lot on a physical level. Light codes are coming in, particularly in this Lionsgate window, where we have a huge opportunity to upgrade. But anytime we do something good for ourselves, the things that have been difficult want to leave and exit, and that's not always pretty, that's not always comfortable. We might find ourselves crying a lot and think, God, do I have depression? But we don't want to slap labels on ourselves, because that's what the Matrix does. That's what old paradigm energy does. Oh, you're depressed. Oh, you're bipolar. Oh, you have an anxiety disorder. Oh, you have this condition. Oh, this is wrong with you. We have to recognize that a lot of what we feel and experience, not only is the grief and anger an appropriate response to the desecration of all that's sacred, it's not a destination. So we have to keep following it until it becomes something meaningful and beautiful, because everything before that that's not comfortable is not where it remains. It's a part of the alchemy. Same thing with, when we move into these activations, some of it can be incredibly uncomfortable, but if we rest that discomfort on some sort of diagnosis, or we give our power away to a doctor that's going to limit our capacity to complete that initiation, then all of a sudden we're stuck in our track and we're projecting upon ourselves that must be true. So as we go through these different changes, we have to take the adversity of our physical symptoms, our emotional symptoms, our mental symptoms, and not allow the discomfort to cause us to think that we're trapped in it, or this is the reality that is in front of us. Just keep following your nose to inspiration, to light, to divine source, to energy, to, embracing the dark, knowing it's the womb, it's the soil where we plant seeds to grow new life. Don't be afraid of any part of who you are, and just keep that in mind as you move through all this, because once we start to activate our galactic chakras and start to upgrade our DNA, we're beginning to change our density from carbon-based to crystalline, which allows us to not be so dense, right? Where we understand that spirit holds dominion over matter. Matter is not the one in charge. When matter is in charge, we tend to feel like we're at the mercy of everything, whatever's going on in the news. We are not co-creative. We're not a participant. We're just a victim to it all, or, and it just depends, just hoping, something will come and save us, or there's going to be some good news headline to make us feel better in that day. Again, if we turn it all on ourselves and we do that work, the reality is going to change before our eyes when we go from the inside out rather than the outside in. And we're moving, in a really great direction. But the thing is, if we do have a compromised physical self, just don't be afraid of it, because if your consciousness can move through the gates, your physical will eventually catch up, even if you lose your physical in this lifetime. Because if we get so afraid, if my body doesn't shift into this macabre, if I don't start to enter the crystalline and I end up dying, or I can't seem to heal this cancer, no matter how many alternative approaches, it doesn't matter, because it never ends.
Right.
Just remember the bigger picture at all times, but just know that if you really are willing to do the inner work, I believe there's nothing that you can't heal, and that the earth provides unbelievable abundance, and all the medicines we could possibly want is available to us in nature. We got to be very careful of those matrix institutions, the medical industry. Not to say that there aren't incredibly helpful ones. I've ended up in the ER enough times to be like, thank you. But then there's a dark side to it too. So, we want to kind of have our foot in both worlds as we transition. Stay sovereign, enjoy the resources without giving our power completely and totally to it, start to return to the earth, because I swear Chinese herbs and the herbs I've worked with and some of the supplements I take have been a lifesaver. Mm-hmm. But the greatest lifesaver is my ability to shift my perspective and see things differently and really tune into, no matter how bad I feel or insecure or unworthy, that's just a small aspect of the fullness of the rest of who I am. And there's higher aspects that I'd rather be running the show here. And it's a conscious decision every day.
You mentioned supplements, and obviously, yes, the supplements help with the acute situation, right? And balancing the light and balancing who we are takes care of the root cause, right? And the chronic situation or the underlying imbalance. Do you mind if I ask you to share a little bit about your experience with super shots? I don't want to put you on the spot, so you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to.
Oh my gosh, well, it's fulvic acid. It's the kind of thing that can attach to heavy metals. It can help with fibromyalgia, lung issues, asthma. It's the kind of thing that's gonna, just really cleanse the blood. It's really amazing for the blood. I've been receiving it once a month.
It just went out today.
And one time I felt like I had been poisoned. I don't know if it was some sort of attack. And I actually had to do an interview, and I literally, I'm like, what do I grab? I've got all these great supplements. And it was one of the first times that I was sent a Super Shots bottle. I had just gone to a SETI. And I was like, oh my gosh, you have Super Shots. Try Super Shots. And I had a few glassfuls, put it in water, and I drank it. And literally, I could feel all of it clearing. And I woke up and I was okay. And I almost ended up in the ER. I thought I was going to die. I'm like, that would be really embarrassing doing an interview. I'm like, oh, Laura just died. And I drank this fulvic acid, which I highly recommend you research. It's got, I guess, trace minerals. It's connected to ancient, just where all these nutrients are collected in the earth that's gathered, and you put it in your body. It does wonders. I just want to say one more thing. Folic acid, anybody with anti-inflammatory issues, and you want to boost your immune system, you want to move in this direction. It really helped me with that. It really helped me because I had a head injury, and it cured it. It just helped to heal that really, really rapidly. That's what I used. Oh my gosh, it's really good stuff. And you can get it through you. And I'd like to say I swear by it. And I do, with full honesty, swear by it.
Well, and I think, everyone uses their own discernment, so this is,
Well, that's why I'm careful, because I'm not I'm trying to sell something here.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to say that without it sounding like I'm trying to sell it, but, I don't speak well of anything that I haven't used for a period of time and tried myself and seen the results. Right. Or else I just, tell Ashley before the show.
Don't ask me that.
Whatever product that I got from her, it was nice and everything, but it's not really working. And you already know because I've given you so much feedback that, that's why you're asking. And it's incredible. So, and it's not very expensive. And for what it is, it's totally worth it.
Well, I think, and it comes from, you talk about Chiron, right? And Joseph, as the wounded healer that he was, or his journey, he had psoriasis and eczema over 98% of his body, and he read the side effects of the drugs they try to give you, and he's like, you've got to be kidding me. And he went on a journey of many years, and, the universe introduced him to an Arapaho Iroquois medicine man, and then he started developing the product. So again, the information's on the goldengoddesses.org website under the toolkit, under healing. And, feel into it. Trust what resonates for you, listeners. I'm not trying to hard sell, but I do want to share because it as the body comes into balance, it helps us bring in more light as well. And talking about balancing, you talked about once we activate the 13th chakra and these dormant DNA. I know the listeners are going to want to ask for suggestions of how do we do that? And it's probably an open-ended answer, but what would you share as your kind of key thoughts on that process of activating that 13th chakra and allowing or supporting that dormant DNA? Are we just subject to our timeline that we came in on and it's just going to happen when it happens, or are there things that we do intentionally that support that activation?
So the 13th gate, the best way to really understand it is the 13th gate, connected to the Divine Mother, is our capacity to reconnect with the earth, understanding that it's an ascension planet. It's not just this, the web of life exists within our soul, earth, air, fire, water, ether. We're made of it. We're a replica of Gaia and her earth grids in the multidimensional cosmos. And the 13th gate actually connects us with the 0 point. And when we look at the 0 point, it's the unified field. It's where the masculine and feminine are in oneness. It's where polarity integration has been successful. It's where light and dark, masculine and feminine, science and spirituality, all these different polarities are no longer compartmentalized. They're no longer in opposition to each other. It's not about, the right and the left in battle. It's where the war ends, right? So if you want to connect in with it, you got to really look at that struggle that you might be feeling when you are waking up to everyday reality. Are you choosing sides? Are you polarized? Do you, associate more with the masculine or the feminine? And that's okay, because we have our orientations. We might feel more water than fire. But how much do we respect the polarity? How much do we work with it and dance with it and harmonize with it versus feeling almost in competition to it?
Right.
It's like patriarchy. They're denying their feminine side, which is built into their brain, their circuitry, their energetic body. Like, why would you want to cut off half yourself and just be dominant? The feminine, you might think, we're not going to step up and be warriors. We're just going to be the product of patriarchy and be a victim that's still stuck in the underworld. So, it's just our ability to kind of rise and just look at it like a true love story. Look at it almost like a fairy tale. A lot of movies, well, I don't even want to say the word movies anymore because I'm just disappointed in Hollywood. But the archetypal fairy tales of, true love. You face that villain. You go through the dark night of the soul. You have to face the opposition. But what does it end up in? The happily ever after. But that's within our own DNA and chakra system that we get to experience it, where we've had this, imposter, this patriarchal, kind of terrible partner that has been encouraging humanity to stay polarized, that has caused us fear. We see all this injustice. But, we can divorce that. We can divorce the imposter and begin to look at, well, what's the true love? We could call it Christ consciousness. We could call it divine feminine, divine masculine. We can put names on it. It doesn't matter. But it's where the masculine and the feminine, the light and the dark, are not carrying distortions to the point where it produces war and conflict. It's where we're living the highest levels of it so that they're in a dance and they're in a flow. And the best thing that you can do is just devote to it. Just say, hey, I devote to getting these activations. You might want to walk around barefoot. You might want to spend some time in nature. Really pay attention to the birds flying by and the plants that are around you, because it's all medicine. Like, oh my gosh, you just saw a hawk. But if you're just in a matrix land, you might not even notice that hawk. You might not notice that eagle. You might not notice that beautiful flower. Nature speaks to us. It heals us. It activates us. And as we're moving into these ascension energies, nature is encoded with the ascension. But if we get steered into an artificial timeline, then transhumanism is breathing down our neck, and we're sort of on a life support system that's not really organic. So just stay connected with nature. She'll guide us, and look within yourself to where you're majorly conflicted. Are you in relationships where you're resentful towards the masculine? Are you projecting upon him? Can you help that energy heal as well? Because that's also a part of a female energetic body. I guess my suggestion is, the tool can be helpful because you can feel into unconscious wounds, separate yourself a little bit from all the hoopla and circus that's out there trying to tell you what to think and what to feel, and just really just center yourself within and just know that, your internal peace is determined by your ability to integrate these polarities and not allow the external world's definition of it to define who you are and how you should react. Some of that's going to come up when it comes to criminals or pedophilia and, just the horrors and crimes against humanity. If you find yourself constantly fighting people or in conflict or in dramas, that's a clear sign that there's inner work to do. And when you can find a more neutral perspective and you can join into the unified field, not only are you going to bypass some of those conflicts, you're going to show up as a great example to begin to either smooth them out, help a person raise their vibration a little bit and meet you there, or create a boundary and know how to walk away and just say no. And that's going to just put you more in touch than you realize. It's all very organic. I think we overcomplicate things. I know I sound like I have a lot of complex information. I always like to simplify it, because it is very simple. You being just your natural you, without having to apologize for it and just doing it, is your greatest guide. Work from the inside out. Put yourself first without it needing, it doesn't need to be defined as service to self. But if you can serve yourself in the most beautiful way, you're truly in service to others. If you overextend yourself and you externalize it all too much, you might deny your greatest needs. So it's really a balancing act.
Yes.
Just balance. And, when conflict and things come up, just give yourself the opportunity to make it a priority to process it and look at it for what it is. You know, we're taught 9 to 5, go to work, you know, relationships and working out stuff is just sort of, you know, people roll their eyes at it sometimes. It's like, there's nothing more important that we can do than to nurture a beautiful relationship with ourselves, with the earth, with the cosmos, and with the people that are in front of us. And if you can't have breakthroughs and you can't be on a healing path with certain individuals, don't be afraid to walk away. You know, it doesn't mean abandonment, but it might mean that you plant a few seeds, you have as many healthy conversations as you can. If it's not going anywhere, you owe yourself a better life.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the beautiful messages I got was that, you know, when my cup runneth over, when I've taken care and nurtured myself, I then can be of service from that place of unconditional or a strong foundation. I believe the times for being a martyr have ended, right? We've had those lifetimes or timelines, and we're not serving anyone and we're not serving our own ascension mission if we're depleting ourselves thinking that this is going to get us that golden ticket. I truly feel that it's all about ensuring that we're in balance first before we continue to try to give to others, because that's when that energy comes out of balance and resentment comes up. It doesn't mean it doesn't ebb and flow, but that martyr stuff is done. You know, we've got the t-shirt, we've been there, it's over.
Right. Totally.
And then I also wanted to just chat a little bit about, you and I have talked about this before, in when I've been doing my healing work. I started, you know, in Australia when I lived there doing hands-on healing and things, and people would always say they wanted to go home. And I'm not judging anyone for saying that, but it always confused me a little bit because to me, this is just my story. It's not anyone else's story, but home has always been going back into what I call the great cosmic soup of all that is, where I don't necessarily have a personality identity, even from the higher self, the I am presence. I'm just the oneness in that consciousness without a flavor that is, even if it's a higher dimensional flavor. And so I was always so in gratitude for being on the planet. And Gaia had this conversation with me when I asked her why so many people wanted to leave. And she said it's obviously because of the distortion that's happened here. But she encouraged me to share with people that she's not the concrete chaos. She's not the corruption of the collective. She's not the archonic energy. She is that divine mother. The amazing nature, the mountains and the glaciers and the oceans and all the animals. Yes, there's a lot that humanity has done to negatively impact that, but don't blame that on Gaia.
Yes.
You know, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and I've been seeing a lot of demonization of just the false representations of the mother and how much people still hang on to that without really understanding that it's a planetary consciousness. You know, when we put it down to like a figure in history or an expectation, you know, just same with distortions with the Christ energy. I mean, we have to understand that this template exists within us. And if we deny it outside of ourselves, what are we doing to it inside of ourselves? How can we just drop the stories? Can we just understand that most of our history and a lot of these mythologies have been, you know, tampered with or, you know, just to create a disconnect amongst each other and within ourselves. We don't need to try and understand who we are necessarily through, you know, trying to get to the bottom of the history. Let's get to the bottom of what we're made of. I mean, that's my passion. Yes. Our chakras, our DNA, how it relates to the earth grids and our multidimensional cosmos. And sure, there's different figures, they did great things, but if we don't understand them completely and totally, why does that have to be a projection of how we feel about something that we're innately made of? You know, it's like saying, like I said, the patriarchy demonizing the feminine. They just cut off half of themselves. And same with women that are healing. If we brand every man to be, you know, that schmuck from ancient, you know,
right.
I mean, we gotta open the box for us all to climb out of and just, you know, recognize the true history, the true her story, the true story is within our soul. And the more we can identify with the frequency and vibration of what it can produce instead of the storylines that have been somewhat tampered with and the history of all these historical resentments because of these world wars that want to conquer and divide us, we'll continue to deny our own aspects. I mean, there's all these different root races. There's, you know, different things that we awaken in each other. But we're taught to resent certain bloodline. Well, I know the Illuminati is a little different, but certain races, certain, like Jews, Nazis, Germans. It's like there's a huge difference between the gang and the mafia of those races and the true essence that we all need to unify upon so that we can begin to switch on those dormant strands, because we carry codes that we can share in order to do that.
Well, I've been very fortunate. I've traveled a great deal of the planet. I've lived in over 7 countries and traveled, to about 60. I lost track. And, what really came down is that the majority of us are the same. We have the same concerns: a better life for our children, a roof over our head, and food on the table. And when we hold that frequency and understand that's the majority, not the minority, the world is a much brighter place, and we can hold that higher frequency and be in that space of being the change that we want to see, and understanding that when we talk about the patriarchal agenda, we're not male bashing. That oftentimes gets turned around, and you get accused of bashing men, that you're some kind of or I get accused of being some kind of a feminist, and that's not it at all. I'm there for balance, the hierogamos, as you said, right? Coming together, the unity. And in closing, how would you respond to those perhaps accusations that you've received?
Oh gosh, yeah, it's like it can be further from the truth, but the patriarchal system, targets men and women. It's not just a male thing, like, oh, the men have just been so, terrible. It's like, well, women have bought into the patriarchal program by playing either the seductress archetype, being stuck in the victimhood, needing to play the same game and have the power switch over to them. It's like, I want balance too, but I'm not going to deny that there's not a patriarchal agenda. Just look at our money. It's like they're all men. Look at the religions. They're all men. I mean, it's kind of obvious in our face. But
well, and then they call ISIS, and they do everything they can, right? I mean, just the word ISIS, which was, made up, is just another slap in the face of the divine feminine.
Right, and Gaia TV with the satanic background, and Sophia being the first AI robot.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't think of that one. That's fascinating.
Right, and it's just as much of a target on the men as it has been on the women. They go to war, they get their limbs blown off, they're not taught to be able to cry. I mean, I have so much compassion for the male, but I see it as an agenda that's impacted all of us. Absolutely. And that's why it's not about male bashing, it's about how has it impacted both sides, and what can we do to heal together and hold space for each other.
And not be afraid to go there, right? Not be afraid to go into that vulnerability and that union and that supporting each other.
Totally. And you and I are both in, relationships with men we adore. And, it's a willingness. It's a willingness to rise as a feminine energy within the male as well. And to rise in the feminine. It's like the creative and the receptive. I mean, we need to just be whole and support that growth and that healing with everybody we come across. And if it's just not possible, have a boundary. And if they come back around, I mean, I'm the kind of person that says, absolutely, I have open arms and there's forgiveness. It takes people a little bit of time, and, I'm a work in progress just like anybody else too, but I definitely know that I've been focused in on this for a really long time, and I would never, want to be misunderstood for, falling into that trap, because it is kind of a programming. It's just another movement. I mean, the truth movement, the disclosure movement's targeted. And that's why it's so important to be sovereign. I mean, we see Gaia TV associated with Luciferianism, and it has nothing to do with the people that work there, our friends and colleagues necessarily, and that's between them and their own process to work out. But, infiltration of things that are movements. I mean, let's be our own personal movement and sovereign self and come together with mutual love and respect and harmonize, because to me, oneness is diversity and harmony. It's not about trying to get everybody to be the same. It's just appreciating the differences and learning how to work with that, just like the web of life shows us.
Absolutely. And Laura, I just want to thank you for being so generous with all that you do, that you've done along your journey, and for your time tonight. So there's been so much to share, and you and I could go on for hours, but I do want to honor your energy as well. And so please just reiterate your email and your website again.
Well, that's why I'm so excited to do more with you, and I look forward to September.
Yes.
It's just really wonderful to have been on this show with you, and thank you. And my website's cosmicgaia.org. Get a reading and check out what events are coming up, and just really just happy to be a part of this unity consciousness, and really glad for you guys showing up. And thanks again, Ashli. It's been wonderful.
It's been an honor. And just as a reminder, the sweepstakes, if you will, to win a 30-minute reading with Laura will stay open until 11:59, Wednesday, August 8th. I love how it's on the 8/8 gateway that we're going to close it. And it's going to be announced on next week's radio show. And then the winner will be advised via email. And again, Laura and I will be doing a webinar in September. We're working on finalizing those details. So we look forward to each and every one of you continuing to shine in your light and to continue on your journey of your threshold to your ascension. Laura, I love you. Thank Kevin for allowing you to spend so much time with us. Not that he's allowing you, but for sharing you. And we'll talk again soon, Goddess.
Okay, Goddess, I love you too.
I love you, Mahalo. Good night.
Bye.